Welcome and thank you for joining the Middle School Matters webinar entitled Effective Professional Development to Support What Works. My name is Christy Murray. I'm the Project Director for the Middle School Matters Institute, and I'll be moderating today's call. Our presentation today focuses on Principles 3 and 5 of the Effective Teacher section of the Middle School Matters Field Guide, which is available for download from our website. Our presenters this afternoon are Dr. Stephanie Otaiba and Miriam Ortiz, both from Southern Methodist University. Dr. Otaiba is a professor in the Simmons School of Education and Human Development at SMU. She was previously an assistant professor at Florida State University and a faculty associate of the Florida Center for Reading Research. Previously, she was also a special educator for over 13 years. She has published over 80 articles and chapters related to her research interests, which include early literacy interventions for students with or at risk for disabilities, teacher training, and response to intervention. Miriam Ortiz is a second-year doctoral student at SMU. Before coming to SMU as a Simmons Graduate Fellow, Miriam taught 5th through 8th grade math, skills, and academic achievement of struggling students, as well as English language learners. So it's a real pleasure to have both of them with us today, and I am going to turn things over to Dr. Otaiba. Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's great to meet you via web. I'm Stephanie. Hello, and I'm Miriam. Our agenda for today, I'd like to start off with some general principles and resources for you to convey a framework that's applicable to professional development from a downloadable document called How People Learn. And just to reinforce what Christy stated, that a lot of the resources that you have on understanding middle school matters are going to be really helpful. We're going to be providing you some examples of practicing the principles from the field and hopefully provide you some helpful resources for ongoing learning. So the book that I mentioned is free to download online. It's right here. It's the scientific framework of how people learn. And that book specifically is helpful when you're looking at professional development to think about finding programs that are going to promote adaptive expertise so that they're learner-centered, meaning that they pay careful attention to the knowledge, skills, attitudes, and beliefs that teacher learners bring to the educational setting. In turn, teachers need to realize that new knowledge is built on existing knowledge, that neither themselves nor students are blank slates. And leaders for professional development then need to uncover the incomplete understandings, some false beliefs, or perhaps naive renditions of concepts that teachers have when they begin any professional development. If these are ignored, then teachers may develop understandings that are very different from what you as principals or leaders intend for them to gain. By knowledge-centered, we're talking about environments that take seriously the need to help teachers learn the bodies of research about using data to inform, plan, and adjust instruction. So leaders for the professional development need to set clear learning goals. And you're going to see a fairly clear objective in a data meeting that we're going to be showing a video of that tells teachers exactly what knowledge they're going to be gaining from the data and how they can use that. In terms of assessment-centered environments, those are environments that provide frequent formal and informal opportunities for feedback to teachers that's focused on their understanding, not memorization, but an understanding with encouragement and reward for meaningful learning. So honest feedback opportunities are something you're also going to see in a clip where a principal is giving some corrective feedback to a teacher. Community-centered means that people are learning from each other. So there's a norm, a new norm that's fostered, a new vision for a professional learning community or communities for practice, because teachers will be encouraged to make and then learn from their mistakes. And intellectual camaraderie can then foster support, challenge teachers, and help teachers to collaborate. In addition, another resource that's helpful is this book called How Learning Works. And these are 7 research brain-based principles that can help with professional development. And I won't read each one of those to you, but I hope that through the slides today you'll see examples of how schools are working to really help teachers organize their knowledge, to understand more about their own motivation, and to help them develop mastery. So that brings us to the principle number 3. As Christy said, we're going to focus on 2 main principles, and the specific practice of providing effective demonstrations, PD, and support for teachers on the necessity of using data to inform, to plan, and to adjust instruction. So it's another guiding document that may be a good resource to you. There's a very helpful practice guide for response to intervention that Dr. Gersten and colleagues did, and they wanted to recommend 5 core components of RTI, include universal screening, high-quality instruction, progress monitoring, increasingly intensive tiers of intervention, and documentation of fidelity of implementation. So the overall point of this practice guide is that data and its use are really the key and the foundation for response to intervention. I'd like us to kind of keep this slide and some of these questions at the back of our mind, so that maybe when we finish today we'll be able to talk a little bit about where you are in terms of the level of understanding versus frustration or misunderstanding about using data on the part of parents, teachers, and students, or to consider whether you're swimming in data without really having time to digest it. So some of these questions we'll come back to at the end. And in particular, what kind of data or changes in data would your school community really embrace and celebrate? So the point is, with data, we want to use it and not lose it. We don't want data to be something that just gathers dust or that gets too complicated for teachers to actually action. And it's important that principals as school leaders guarantee a really consistent time for training and for communities of teachers to work together to analyze data, to inform and adjust instruction. And we're going to show you a slide that's pretty helpful in terms of seeing how such a data meeting might fall into place. And I want to emphasize to you that there's quite a rich history of research and converging evidence that shows that when you're able to use data formatively, that is to say along the way, to inform and adjust instruction, that it can be very powerful. And it can involve teachers adjusting their instruction, providing student feedback on their performance and how students can improve, as well as student self-assessment. And my former dissertation advisors, Doug and Lynn Fuchs, for quite a while ago, presented some really interesting information showing that frequent formative assessment yielded what's called an effect size, a higher effect size in student improvement than did just a high-stakes end-of-year summative assessment. So to give you an idea, if you're not familiar with effect size, or D as a metric, what that means is that in classrooms where teachers were using formative assessment, students increased about 3/4 of a standard deviation faster than did students where teachers were in a control condition. And high-stakes summative assessment only led to about 1/5 of a standard deviation difference versus a control group. And that's fairly consistent with a huge synthesis of multiple meta-analyses that was conducted by Hattie. And again, the effect size metric there is that formative progress monitoring was strongly associated, almost a whole standard deviation. A D of 1 is a full standard deviation of difference for formative progress monitoring and for feedback. So what are some of the leadership factors that are related to student outcomes? Marzano and Waters' work is also cited and available for you on the Middle School Matters website. Some of the key factors that had the strongest correlations or association to student outcomes were ensuring collaborative goal setting, establishing really non-negotiable goals for teaching and learning outcomes, monitoring achievement and instructional goals, and then allocating resources to support those goals. It's really hard to achieve things if you don't have resources. Miriam and I were working towards developing a grant this year, and we came across a really interesting survey that we thought would be interesting to share the results with you today. So this was a survey of districts that were nominated across the country as high data users. And even though these districts were high data users, they reported that on the one hand, teachers were assessing student data systems much more frequently than they had in the past. About 3/4 of teachers were accessing student data. But the data systems typically held more information about accountability concerns rather than the kind of formative progress monitoring data that would really help teachers individualize instruction. And consistent with what teachers self-reported, most of them indicated that they could find the data, but less than half of them understood how to really interpret the data. And the four system supports that were consistently reported to be helpful by teachers in those high data high data user districts were leadership for school improvement and data use, for accessing data that is actionable, social structures like communities of practice, and protected time to analyze and interpret data. And you'll see that also in the data meeting, that teachers weren't giving up planning time to have time to talk about data. There were separate windows of time. And that there was support, technical support and professional development for using data and to help that data be actionable. We also took note of an Office of Special Education IDEA implementation study conducted by Ellen Schiller and her colleagues, and they reported that the general education instructional environment was negatively impacted by the lack of sustained professional development, particularly in the area of data-driven decision-making. So we've got converging findings that using data formatively is powerful. We have high-end users telling us that it's hard to find actionable formative data within their systems. And we also have information here that the general education environment is negatively impacted by that gap. So not only is that an issue for teachers and for schools, but a lot of us have probably had struggles trying to help parents understand about data. So my intention in showing, or our intention in showing this clip, is so that you can see a principal in an urban school district explaining some strategies to other principals about how to inform parent perceptions about using data, and also about how to get parents that might be reluctant parents to a student study team. I thought, and my thought process is also that that strategy might be very helpful for those of you who have a high proportion of parents who themselves don't have English as a first language. Is offering parent workshops, that's a great idea. Allowing them access to a parent portal, doing home visits. I like the idea of a parent university. That's a good idea. It's funny, too, because A lot of parents are able to stay connected with schools during the elementary years, but some of that engagement kind of fades away, or they get fatigued a little bit, I think, once kids get into middle school. We're going to also be watching another video, and this is going to last about 10 minutes. I think you'll find this really an interesting story, and I'm wondering the degree to which it's going to kind of parallel your own stories. It's about a middle school that wasn't a school that a lot of families wanted their children to attend, but they had really worked hard to develop a problem-solving mindset. So they've shifted from being kind of a stagnant, fixed mindset to being very growth-oriented. So as you watch, keep in mind the perspectives of the staff, and consider if this video might even be something that would help you if you need to help motivate your staff to begin to think differently. Think about the middle school model for RTI and how that's really different than elementary. This school creates a team approach that really seems to be powerful. So you might think about how you are involving your teachers as a team to help you quickly move to adjust instruction and manage resources fluently. And thinking about how you might involve your students as well in goal planning so that they see themselves as growers rather than kids that have a fixed ability and they're never going to be able to improve because they don't have enough of whatever that ability is. So moving on to the second practice within Principle 3, that practice is leading teachers and school staff through the process of using data to identify and plan for changes in the instructional program. And I hope you'll agree that that videotape of Russell Middle School gave us a good example of what that looks like. Next up, we're going to be taking a look at a data meeting, and we're going to try to unpack this data meeting. It's a meeting that's going to be specific to the area of writing. Miriam and I have tried to choose different information outlets for you that focus on different content. So in this next video clip, you're going to see the principal as being a strong facilitator. Take note of how carefully she structures time, and just as in the prior video, she uses very specific language about setting clear goals. You might also note that her team has an agenda and that there is a person who is dedicated as the timekeeper. Another kind of interesting strategy that this principal used, we thought, was that she brought in 2 grade levels. She brought in grades 5 and 6. And she brought in 6 because they had shown greater gains in writing proficiency. So some of the suggestions that came from this meeting were going to be to pull peer anchor papers to show what a good writing sample looks like, even across grades. It was impressive that all teachers had a voice in this very collaborative discussion, and they also were able to clearly get to an identification of where the problem was, and that was a lack of application. In turn, the principal held all of the teachers accountable for planning how to make improvement, and they had a very great dialogue about that. And then there was a very clear action step at the end of the meeting. What are 1 to 3 strategies that we can all agree on prior to our next meeting in 2 weeks? Moving on to Principle 5, which is implementing ongoing intensive professional PD, specifically Practice 1, instituting frequent and ongoing site-based professional development opportunities. And I think the colloquial here is don't spray and pray, and to keep in mind that good, high-quality professional development takes time. So if you don't get a rapid response. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So there are a variety of methods for developing professional development. Some of you might use in-service workshops and teacher study groups, in-class coaching, and more recently, I'm seeing more use of some web-based coaching. Which is suggesting that pairing in-service courses with workshops or in-class follow-up support from a coach or mentor may produce even stronger results than just a workshop. And there's also evidence from some longitudinal studies that's emerging to show us that on average, the impact of professional development really does increase or accumulate across time, both in terms of findings for teachers and changing their practice, but also in terms of accumulating in terms of student data. I'm going to share with you an audio podcast this time. There won't be any video. And I'm doing this to highlight for you a really wonderful resource, the IRIS Center at Vanderbilt University. It has a lot of really helpful resources. Some are also available in Spanish, some of the resources for parents. And this particular panel includes people that are really in the know in terms of primarily reading and also some special education. It will feature Larry Wexler as well as Joe Torgerson and another colleague. And once we get this podcast going, I want you to think about how the emphasis here is on helping you think through not just what kind of professional development or what kind of a program you're going to put in place, but what resources does your school need to have in order for that program to be successful for you and for your population. There are great supports on the IRIS website that might help you with principal walkthroughs, with thinking about how you might create checklists to monitor whether interventions are being implemented with fidelity, meaning that all of the steps are completed correctly, that the correct amount of time is being adhered to. There are tremendous supports there for using data to monitor progress, and other things that you can use for in-house resources around professional development. Some tips from the podcast that I think will be helpful is thinking about knowing the evidence, but like I said, considering your population. So looking at an intervention that you might want to put into place, consider how widely used it might be to see whether the curriculum is aligned with our state standards. And I think our standards are fairly close to the Common Core standards, but just making sure that the alignment is there not only with the standards, but with the other instruction that's in place at the school site. Is your staff and knowledge and are the resources adequate that you can pull this particular intervention off? If it's an intervention that's meant to be one-on-one, for example, are you going to be able to have the resources to do that? Most of the interventions that are available offer PD, but you want to consider how in-depth is the professional development, and does the developer of the curriculum or intervention offer extended support? So that is this something that realistically you can sustain across time in order to allow the intervention effects to begin to accumulate? Does the evidence exist to really support this intervention, and are the outcomes that are purported to be positive, are those related to your own particular goals? I put in here, or we put in here, a couple of resources for you that have to do with the Best Evidence Encyclopedia and the What Works Clearinghouse, as well as the Center on Instruction. These are all offer very teacher-friendly resources to help you read and interpret research. But of course, you already have the wonderful resource of Middle School Matters. And finally, at the end of this audio podcast, Dr. Joe Torgerson, who was my colleague at the Florida Center for Reading Research and who has since retired, warns that it takes time and expertise in any area to find a good program, and the importance of finding a program that includes structured and systematic instruction and cumulative review and practice. Moving now to the second practice within Principle 5, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about some of our own research that we've done with teachers of younger children that's focused more on reading. And I do that to show you that it's important to provide time and resources for professional development that's focused on subject matter that teachers are expected to teach. So we conducted a literature review to try to examine how well researchers have been able to demonstrate causal linkages among professional development, changing teacher knowledge and implementation, and in turn, changing student outcomes. And we found at least 22 studies of primary grade reading instruction, professional development for primary grade beginning reading instruction that address this linkage directly. And I want to share with you one of the strongest studies to date was conducted by Dr. Boss and colleagues. She was at UT Austin, and they established a very clear linkage. So this is an example of the kind of linkage you can look for that goes beyond a professional development company coming in and saying, we have evidence-based professional development. I think a lot of people are using the term evidence-based or scientifically based, and this is what we're really looking for. First of all, the focus of her professional development was really clearly related to reading. Teachers' knowledge of the structure of language and attitudes were reliably measured, and significant gains were found. Teachers were observed in their classrooms to show that they implemented with fidelity, and students showed significant gains relative to control. Other ways you might begin to monitor instructional effectiveness and fidelity are cited right here. And I want to emphasize that you will have access to these, and in this particular clip, the principal is actually giving a teacher very clear feedback. It begins with a praise and a celebration of what she's doing, and her questions help the teacher target her own weakness and then subsequently develop action steps that would change her practice. I'm of collaborative strategic reading, which is a reading intervention program that has a very strong professional development strategy behind it. It also has strong research to show that it works for diverse learners, that it works across content areas, so there's disciplinary literacy. So if you're a science teacher, it's a strategy that you can use to help build literacy within science. It's received extensive federal funding, including some current work that's ongoing in collaboration with Colorado school partners. So I'll let you guys take a look at that link on your own base and time, so that we will have time to listen to the author of this collaborative strategic reading, Jeanette Klinger, talk a little bit about RTI for English language learners. I would like to also suggest that you guys take time to watch the Math and Science PD video. This is an excellent video that talks about a collaboration with university partners, and some of the key points here that I think will emerge from watching this video is that teachers really need ongoing professional development. There's a wonderful respect for teachers in this that just comes right through the content from so the researchers don't condescend, if you will, to the teachers. They really help teachers become leaders who in turn can go back to their own schools and provide trainings to communities of practitioners that are partners. The third practice is providing targeted professional development that is an intensive format and that's continuous throughout the year. And again, that reflects very well on the math and science collaboration with university partners. We have conducted some studies that have also shown that when teachers use data to inform and adjust instruction, outcomes were higher for children, about a half a standard deviation higher than in classrooms where teachers learn the same content but only in a workshop format. And with my colleague Carol Connor, we have begun to show that through a longitudinal randomized control trial that these differences, at least in the early years, are really beginning to accumulate, and that these effects are achieved and achievable by regular classroom teachers. I also am highlighting some work of my colleague Michael Coyne, who has done something as simple as following a standard protocol in comparison to allowing teachers to regroup based on whether or not students mastered the content, and found anywhere from 1/4 to 3/4 of a standard deviation better outcomes on post-tests in the adjusted group. There's also a series of studies that have been conducted by our colleague at UT Austin, Sharon Vaughn, showing that this consistent effort is really important for middle school. It takes time for children to catch up to their peers. They have some wonderful resources on the Texas LD Center website. Dr. Klingner's video is the last clip that we're going to watch. We're not going to watch the whole thing. She provides a really strong rationale for providing professional development for teachers to help them discern the difference between language differences and learning disabilities. And today, I just want you to listen a little bit to her important caveat about using formative assessment like oral reading fluency for ELL. So the last two slides really just include some resources of some of the texts and the books that I mentioned in terms of bigger principles of how people learn. And there are a series of links to some resources that I think you'll find helpful when you click on them. Thank you so much for today. It's just been such a delight having a chance to interact with you, and I hope you'll continue to ask questions of us as you find them. Please feel free to email.
Thank you so much, Stephanie and Miriam. That is all just such relevant information, and it's clear that both of you are masters of effective professional development. So thank you for providing such a nice model for us. So that's it on our end. Thank you again for your time, and we look forward to the next time we talk or visit with you.